Hello, my amazing Algebra Half students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're doing lesson 54 in our blue books, and it's all about decimal part of a number. Now, we recently did fractional parts of numbers, and now we're doing the decimal part of the number. So here, all we're going to do is turn this statement into a mathematical expression. So we're going to have 0.4. 0.4 of means times what number? So we'll just use n is our equal sign 72. That's it. Now, what do we have to do to get n, which is what we're trying to find, by itself? Now, I'm going to remove the x for the times and put the little dot, because in algebra that's much easier for us to keep straight, because x can be a variable. So now, shouldn't I just divide this side by 0.4 and then divide that side by the same amount? So we're going to divide by 0.4 and we're going to divide by 0.4 over here. So now the 0.4s will cancel and I will get n equals, now 72 divides evenly by 4, but remember the 0.4 down here can be confusing. So what we do is we move our decimal to the right once there, and we move our decimal to the right once on the numerator. So we basically multiplied the denominator and the numerator by 10. So now we have 720 divided by 4 is n. When I look at this with long division, I can say 4 goes into 7 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. Bring down my 2. 4 into 32 is 8. 32, 0. Bring down the 0, and we get a 0. So 180 is our n. So back here on our other board, we will just write here, n is 180. Now, let's check. Okay, so we're going to say 0.4 of 180 is 72. That means if I multiply 180 by 0.4, I should get 72, because remember the of means times. So let's see if 180 times 0.4 equals the 72. So let's do a little check. So here we go. We have 180 times 0.4 to check and see if it does indeed equal 72. So 0 times 4 is 0. 8 times 4 is 32. So we carry the 3. 1 times 4 is 4 plus 3 is 7. We have one decimal point. So indeed we do get 72. And we've answered the problem. Okay, so here we have example 2. What decimal part of 240 is 90? So we could just say, instead of what decimal part, the decimal part is just a decimal, and a decimal is really just a number, but instead of using n, we're going to use d to remind us that it is a decimal. So we're going to say, what decimal of 240, so that's going to be times 240, is our equal sign 90. Okay, so in order to get the decimal part by itself, shouldn't we divide by 240 and divide by 240? Okay, so now the decimal is equal to, now let's simplify this as much as we can. We can take out the 2 zeros because we're just dividing the numerator and the denominator by 10. What if we go ahead and simplify this as well? 9 over 24, both 9 and 24 are divisible by 3. So 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. Now, that's not a decimal part, is it? So we reduced it. We could have just gone ahead and divided long division, or we could divide this long division, but we need a decimal and not a fraction. This is the correct fractional part. So we can either divide 9 by 24 out long ways, or we can divide 3 by 8 because they're the same thing. So now we're just going to divide 9 by 24 because that was the unsimplified fraction that we can turn into a decimal. So remember, 9 cannot divide by 24, so we can add a decimal and a 0. And 24 goes into 9, let's see, maybe 3 times. Okay, so I'm going to have to bring my decimal up. 3 times 4 is 12, and 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, and then I'm going to get an 8 and a 1, so that was right. 18 is less than 24. So now I'm going to bring down another 0, and 24 into 180 is going to go, let's try 7. 7 times 4 is 28. 7 times 2 is 14, 15, 16, and when I subtract, I get a 2, which means that one was now a 7. 7 minus 6 is 1, and I subtracted correctly, or I put the right number here. So now we're going to bring down one more 0. One more 0. One more 0. We're out of room, but 24 goes into 120 exactly 5 times. So I'm going to move my 7 over. I'm going to put my 5, and that's going to end up with 120. So I ran out of room, but my answer is 0.375. So what is the decimal portion? It's 0.375, and that was your second example. So on our other board, where we had 9 over 24, we will say the decimal portion is 0.375. And let's move on to the next example. But do you see how easy it is just to make an equation that represents the words? Here's our last example, and then we'll do a few practices. 4/10 of 72 is what number? So 4/10 we can write as a fraction, and we could write it as a decimal. We could say 0.4. 4/10 as a fraction or 0.4 as a decimal. Does it really matter? Okay, 4/10 of 72, of means times, 72, we'll go ahead and make that a dot, is our equal sign. What number? Okay, so we're looking for the number, and 4/10 could be written as a fraction or as a decimal. So now when we do it, we're going to end up with 72 times 4, and then the decimal moves one place in, because when we divide by 10, we move the decimal one place. So let's figure out 72 times 4 is going to be 8, and then 28. So we have 288 divided by 10, okay, which is the same thing as 288 with the decimal moved one place to the left, which is 28.8. And that is our last example on this lesson. Okay, here is your first example. So since we're doing decimal parts, we're going to go ahead and use the decimal form of 7/10. This is your first practice. Make sure that you copy it down and pause your video. Okay, hopefully you did that. So 7/10 is 0.7, and it really doesn't matter. If you want to, you can write 0.7. Of is times. What number, we'll call that n, is equal, and then 0.14, or just 0.14. So now we have our equation, and to get n all by itself, all we have to do is divide the left hand and the right hand side by this 0.7. So we're going to divide this side by 0.7. We're going to divide this side by 0.7. That's going to leave our n all by itself, and n is going to equal. Now, we don't even try to divide it when we have a decimal divisor. So we're going to move this one to the right and move this one to the right. And so now we have 1.4 divided by 7, and 1.4 divided by 7 is going to be what? Since 14 divided by 7 is 2, then wouldn't 1.4 divided by 7 be 0.2? So n is going to be 0.2. And if you want to put a 0 in the front, you can. So 0.2 is the answer to your first practice. Here's practice number 2. So copy it down on your board and pause your video. 7/100 of 86 is what number? Okay, copy it down and try to turn that into an equation. Then stop your video and come back and see if you did it right. Okay, so here, hopefully you did that and you've already done your problem. So 7/100 we're going to express as a decimal because this whole thing is about decimals. So 0.07 is 7/100. Of is times. 86 is what number? So we don't have to turn anything around. We have our problem already set up for us. N is already by itself, and all we have to do is this multiplication. So we have we have 86, it's not point, that's a times. 86 times 0.07, and we're multiplying them together. 6 times 7, I'm going to move my decimal over here. Okay, 6 times 7 is 42. 8 times 7 is 56, plus 4 is 60. And then 0 doesn't add anything to the mix. So this is my whole answer, but I have to put 1, 2 decimals. So 1, 2 decimals, and 6.02 should be the answer. So 6.02 should be your answer. Here is your last practice. What decimal part of 72 is 30.24? So, copy it down and pause your video. Okay, so let's do this last one. What decimal part? So we're just going to call this D. Of is times. 72 is equal 30.24. Now to get the decimal part all by itself, we divide each side by 72. And we have our work all cut out for us. The D, the decimal part that we're looking for, is 30.24 divided by 72. So now all we have to do is that little bit of math. And here we go. Okay, 72 does not go into 30, but 72 will go into 302. So we're going to go ahead and put our decimal up here and just put a 0 up here because it did not go in at all. So now 72 goes into 302. Let's say maybe 4 times. I may be aiming too high, but let's try it. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 7 is 28. That should work. Okay, so now we're going to subtract, and we have a 2 minus 8, so we'll come over here, make that a 2, make that a 10, make that a 9, and we borrowed all the way across. 4, 9 minus 8 is 1, and 2 minus 2 is 0. And now 72 does not go into 14, but it will go into 144. So it looks like it'll go exactly 2 times. So 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 7 is 14. And we have our answer. The decimal is 42/100 or 0.42. And that is the end of our lesson. So 0.42, let's write that down right here, back on the problem. 0.42 is our decimal portion. This was your last practice, and this is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.